Hey, what's going on YouTube? Son of Sanguinius here, and in this video we're going to be going over some of the new articles that GW has posted this week. In this video we're going to be covering the movement phase and the psychic phase. The video after this I will cover the shooting and assault phase. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. I'm going to be reading the article posted on the Warhammer community website, and I will also be posting a link to this article in the description below. So this article starts off with movement has always been a key to Warhammer 40,000, positioning your units for optimum arcs of fire, advancing to claim objectives, or just plain old charging across the battlefield into combat. Movement in the new edition will be very familiar to players of the game today, but the rules team have taken the opportunity to improve a few elements. In this new edition, every model has its own movement characteristic. This means that rather than moving every model 6 inches, unless specified otherwise, things like Terminators will advance slowly and inexorably, while Harlequins leap and bound, and bikes and speeders zip across the battlefield. So again, just within these first couple of paragraphs, nothing too surprising so far. These are things that we've seen before with the unit profiles. Things will have a movement characteristic. Nothing too surprising there. Some units will have a minimum movement too. This mostly applies to flyers who can't stop. Again, this is much like the rules today, but every flyer will have their own minimum and maximum movement value to represent the fact that these swift fighters will naturally be quicker than a lumbering bomber. So again, this seems logical. It seems pretty cool, to be honest. It makes sense thematically and mechanically that some just as infantry models would probably move slower than models on bikes, some aircraft will be faster than others. So okay. Next paragraph here, it says running has been rolled into the movement phase now too. You can advance when you move by rolling a dice and adding the result to your movement to go a bit faster at the expense of shooting. So again, it's really, I think they really did that just to sort of limit the amount of stuff that you have to keep track of. So if you decide to run a unit or advance a unit, as they give the terminology here, you just can't shoot. So that's fair. Seems logical to me. Moving on, this applies to all models, infantry, vehicles, bikes, everyone. By including this roll as part of your move, the game speeds up, as you no longer have to move models in both the movement and shooting phases. So again, that's nice. Other than that, the movement rules are pretty much what you'd expect today. No moving through enemy models unless you can fly over them, and no walking through solid walls, logical stuff. And then they kind of finish off here with this little bit at the end here. Oh, there was one last thing. If you're in combat at the start of your turn, you can fall back by moving away from the enemy. You'll lose the ability to advance, shoot, or charge that turn, and crucially, enemies will be able to shoot at you. This does, however, open up a vast range of tactical options for armies like the Astra Militarum, who will now be able to effectively deploy in firing lines, with each row falling back from any assaults in good order if they survived, while the unit behind them fires at the attackers. It goes both ways, though. If you have a dedicated assault unit that specializes in killing infantry, like Warp Talons, your opponent will find it much harder to pin them down in combat with heavily armored units for the entire game. That is a big change. We'll let that rattle around in your brain for today, and we'll be back with tomorrow with news about the psychic phase. So, honestly, I kind of have some mixed feelings about it. Some people have been really up on this, saying, hey, this, regardless of whether you're playing a shooty army or an assault army, this basically means that if you're playing shooty, you can, get out of it, and so your unit won't be completely slaughtered. But if you're assaulty, you can get out of, your opponent trying to tar pit you, so to speak. I can see the argument both ways as to why this would be a good decision or a good rule and why it would not. I don't necessarily like the idea that combat is just as easy to get away from as just, a flick of the wrist, but at the same time I also understand that it would be quite annoying to, if I got my assault marines, if I got my death company, my opponent just, throws in all these damn conscripts at me. it would. I can imagine why it would be very difficult and tedious and annoying to try and get around them and position them in such a way, and or I have to try and fight through them all, and I can see it both ways. So we'll have to see how it is in practice, I think. But other than that, I do like what they're doing with the movement phase, throwing in the run, or now they're calling it the advance into the movement phase instead of it being in the shooting phase. I think is nice. So, interestingly enough, I don't think it says. All it says here, interestingly enough, is running has been moved into the movement phase now, too. You can advance when you move by rolling a dice and adding the result to your movement to go a bit faster at the expense of shooting. Notice how it doesn't say you can't assault after you advance, so that's interesting. Again, we'll have to wait and see how the rules play out, but that's definitely interesting. So, now that that's the movement taken care of, we're going to move on to the psychic phase. So, the psychic phase, the article here, it starts with the psychic phase for the new Warhammer 40,000 has changed a fair bit. Previously, each of your psychers would generate warp charge for your pool. This worked pretty well in most games, but in very psyker-heavy armies, it often meant that some psychers sat around not doing a whole bunch, while one or two mega psychers were looking at you, Magnus, you big warp charge hog, had all the fun. In the new system, the psychic phase has been reworked from the ground up. Each time you pick a psyker, you can cast as many spells as their datasheet states, which previously would be the same as their mastery level. And there's a simpler 2-dice mechanic for casting. You just need to beat the warp charge value. The more potent the power, the harder it will be to cast. So already, I feel like we're seeing some positive change here. The fact that, now you can't just have, one mega psyker just slinging out all these powers and just taking charges from other psychers. Now they're sort of changing that around to where you have to beat a value. Now, some more powerful psychers may have a chance to modify that value to try and give you +1 or +2 or +3 to that to your warp charge test in this new edition. But we'll have to wait and see. So moving on, it says, enemy psychers will have a chance to block these powers if they are within 24 inches, and again, the mastery level of the psyker will dictate how often they can block a power each turn. So again, another interesting thing here, we're seeing a little bit more emphasis on the individual psychers and not just, having one big guy and then a bunch of small guys just feeding him warp charges. I kind of like that change. So, it says here, the new system is much more scalable, meaning that the phase works well at any size of game with any number of psychers running around. Perils of the Warp is still there, of course. It wouldn't be Warhammer 40,000 without a chance to accidentally have your mind eaten by a demon and your soul sucked into the psychic oblivion of the Warp, while your body exploded into multifaceted explosion of etheric ichor. I really do love the description there. That's a mouthful of a sentence, but it's nice to see that Perils of the Warp will still be there. It is nice to have that sort of in the back of your mind. You're kind of thinking to yourself, "Ah, man, is my psyker gonna have his that explode, or can I sling my lightning bolt?" So that's nice to see. Perils of the Warp will still be around in 8th edition. Moving on, every faction will have its own psychic lore with a range of thematic powers. In addition, every psyker knows the Smite power. So this one has been causing some debate, and we'll get into this. Article's about to wrap up. It says, Smite has a warp charge value of 5. If manifested, the closest visible enemy unit within 18 inches of the psyker suffers D3 mortal wounds. If the result of the psychic test was more than 10, the target suffers D6 mortal wounds instead. So then they say, mortal wounds are a new mechanic too. These cannot be saved by any means and punch straight through thick armor and even invulnerable saves. Ouch. That's the basics on the psychic phase. Tomorrow we'll be back, with updated Warzone rules for the new Warhammer 40,000. On Sunday, we'll be looking at the shooter phase. Okay. So, it isn't so much that I think people have a problem with every psyker knowing Smite. I think it's really just the problem of these new mortal wounds mechanic, because that seems fairly powerful. And I know GW has said, things are going to die in this new edition, but I don't know. That seems going a little far there. I mean, especially since like no saves are allowed. I've never really. I don't know. We'll have to see how everything plays out. But that's, if every Psyker can do this, can just inflict on average D3 mortal wounds, needing just a 5+ on 2d6. With the likelihood of getting, a 10, which is D6 mortal wounds, that's pretty good, and it's on the unit too, as it says the closest visible enemy unit, not model. So that can be, a killer of potent killer of Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But so far, I'm a little bit hesitant on this one. But overall, I like where they're going with the movement and the psychic phase. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say down below in the comment section below. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.